Shalom. First and foremost, as always, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Makakwadash. I want to give double honors to my apostles at Great Millstone who taught me this truth, and a sincere shalom to the elect out there teaching this truth in all honesty and sincerity in these last days. This is a economy update of the brother Yasharan. And today we're going to get into the dying US dollar. Okay? Because the dollar is dying. It's being rejected by a lot of international governments. Okay? We have all this printing going on. Pretty much the dollar is being attacked from multiple angles, man. You know, it's being attacked by multiple angles, man. You know, and when you rewind back to what happened in 2008 up until about, what was it, 2016, 2017, maybe even 2018, the U.S. kept their interest rates at or near zero for a long time. Okay, a very long time. And that combined with the waning U.S. power, okay, the waning power that the U.S. has around the world, okay, it's a recipe for what? For a crash or collapse of the U.S. dollar, man. You know, and a lot of these nations are starting to bail out. Okay, you have Germany saying that they're not buying any more U.S. debt. Okay, and I have a clip pulled up on one of these tabs about how China is dumping more U.S. treasuries. Okay, and the world is changing, man. You know, they're moving away from these fiat currencies. Okay. Back when I was growing up in the late 80s and 90s, gold was approximately $300 an ounce. And now it's at about $1,700. So that goes to show you, okay, that shows you just how much this fiat currency is declining in value. It's not that gold and silver is going up in value or becoming more rare, it's scarce. It's because the paper money, okay, the paper money is losing value, man, because it's not backed by anything. You know? It's not really backed by anything. The US dollar is pretty much backed by the petrodollar, okay? By these companies or these countries trading oil in dollars. All right, that's pretty much the last bastion of hope that the U.S. has, man, is that petrodollar. All right, it's looking like it's going to be the U.S., Saudi Arabia, all right, and a couple more of their allies, man, that are going to be on their side, and the rest of the world is going to flip the bird to the U.S., man. Well, I have pulled up here is the U.S. dollar index. Now it was up for a couple days. That's probably short sellers. But as you could see here, right, the dollar spiked. Okay, around March 20th, the dollar spiked. Okay, because or broke out a little bit because pretty much during a time of uncertainty, the U.S. dollar has historically been something that investors have flocked to in times of uncertainty, okay? Because it is the chief reserve currency of the world and it is fairly stable, okay? But now, a lot of these investors are seeing, and a lot of these governments around the world are seeing that the United States isn't as stable as they think, man. You know, these riots have a lot to do with it. but it's mostly the coronavirus, man. The U.S. is one of the last remaining countries that has not recovered from this virus. Okay, there's countries in Europe that are pretty much over this thing, man. That aren't recording any new cases. But the United States is starting to see not a second wave, but a continuing first wave, man. You know? And that's ruining a lot of investors' confidence and government's confidence in the U.S., primarily the U.S. dollar, okay? And another reason why the U.S. dollar is also falling and failing is because America is being the bully of the world instead of cooperating with nations. Okay, the scriptures say that America, Babylon the Great, is the hammer of the earth. Okay, it's the hammer of the earth. And the other nations, all right, like the scriptures say, let the weak say I am strong. A lot of these nations are saying, you know what? We have alternatives now. We have Bitcoin. You know, we have that, what is it called? The SWIFT system. All right. There's other things that investors could go to, man, and countries could go to bypass the U.S. dollar through the advancement of technology, man. You know, there's alternatives coming around, man. You know? But I want to play this clip. Okay? Because this is very important, man. New China jumps U.S. debt. Fears dollar plunge. Okay?
Nation's capital. This is the news with Rick Sanchez.
All right. Hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and we want to welcome those of you who've been watching us from all over the world, whether you're watching us on regular TV or on the portable TV app. We're going to begin with a story that could send literal shockwaves through the global economy. According to the Chinese news agency, China is going to begin recalling or selling off the U.S. debt that it controls. Now, this, by the way, would be a very poignant message that it's sending about the U.S. economy, both from a pragmatic standpoint and from a psychological standpoint as well. The message that it would be sending to the rest of the world. China owns more of our debt in the United States than just about any country in the world. So why would they be doing this, right? Well, think about it. So just today, as we reported here as breaking news about an hour ago, the U.S. Federal Reserve came within moments of being pressured into lowering interest rates below zero. In the end, they pulled back from taking them into negative territory. But even that buildup of what they might do was significant enough. So China is worried that when you combine what the Fed has already done in buying back bonds and pouring billions into banks, in printing $2 trillion to pump into a sputtering economy in the United States, what you have.
I have to correct them. They did not print $2 trillion, all right? They flushed the system with $2 trillion, man. All right? They did not print actual $2 trillion. All right? They just added they just did all that shit digitally. All right? It's easier to mask things when they're digital, man. You know? Because a few years ago the Fed stopped keeping track of the I believe the M3 money supply. Okay? So they could just keep adding all this stuff, all these dollars into the system, pumping the system full of money. All right, and they get little blowback from it. All right, because it's easier to mask it because it's digital. Now, if they were printing all that money on paper, okay, then it would be harder to conceal, okay, because it's out there. It's out there. It's more tangible. You can physically touch it. All right. Then people could see that, wait a minute, there's all these dollars all over the place. Where the hell are they coming from, man? You know, because since it's digital, all right, it's not actually on hand. It's a little different, man. You know?
What you have is the makings of a weaker.
Just think of it this way. You know, some brothers, they may like to keep more cash on hand than in their accounts. You know, it's easier to spend money that you're not holding in your hand by way of a smart device or a card than it is when you're actually holding the money, man. You know, it's really different. It's almost like it teaches you to be more responsible because you know exactly how much it is because you could see it. You know, you could see the 20s and the 5s and the 100s or whatever. Okay?
A weaker dollar. In other words, as experts describe it, the U.S. currency will be devalued. And what China is essentially...
And it has been devalued significantly over the years, okay? I mean, just go to your grocery store and look at the food prices.
Saying is, we see a storm coming, and we're going to start getting out of the way while the getting out of the way is good. So what does this really mean for the global economy, right? Who wins? Who loses? And how is this going to affect you and me and the rest of us? We're going to tackle these questions here on The News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it is time, yes it is, to do news again. All right, here's the list of the questions we think he'll be asking. What will happen if China sells off the U.S. debt? Can a protest go too far? And should you be fired for how you protest? And what is the history of barricades and law enforcement around the White House? But we're going to begin with what is a blockbuster of a story. China is finally going through with it. They're beginning to sell off more than $1 trillion it owns of the U.S. debt, our debt. So why are they doing this? And what is it really?
Right, and one of the things that allows the U.S. to keep going into all this debt is because there's other nations that will purchase those treasuries, okay? But once
we're going to
Slacky, but once countries stop purchasing those treasuries, the Fed has to buy it back. Okay? Which devalues the currency, okay?
drill down.
I believe it's called I forgot what it is. Man, I had the term in my head just a minute ago too.
On all of this, but we're going to begin with a RT Boom Bust host, Ben Swann, and this explainer.
The U.S. Federal Reserve's endless printing of U.S. dollars is resulting in a new consequence from one of the largest holders of American debt. We're talking, of course, about China. According to new reports, China, which is the second largest foreign creditor, has decided to not wait for the devaluation of the U.S. dollar and is actively selling American debt. Keep in mind, during the first quarter of 2020, the Fed printed more than $2 trillion, with more on the way. Last year, China got rid of $110 billion in U.S. treasuries, and within just the past few weeks, they have dropped another $10 billion. Aside from the massive printing of U.S. dollars, another major issue for the Chinese has been talk of the Fed moving to negative interest rates. Now, as of Wednesday afternoon, the Fed announced it will not pursue that policy of negative interest rates at this time. But the discussion of negative interest rates has been going on for several months now. According to Standard Chartered economists, the federal fund rate at minus 0.5 or even minus 1% will result in a significant drop in government bond yields, which would facilitate Washington's debt servicing. The concern from the Chinese is that those negative interest rates will not benefit the value of the dollar and that U.S. currency, as a result, will inevitably become cheaper. Now, keep in mind, American debt is a widely held and extremely desirable asset in the global economy.
Right. So it's, again, man, you know, we have to understand that as much as we want things to get absolutely crazy, and this dollar to crash, it's, you know, it's still got some strengths, man, behind it. You know, there is a large appetite for U.S. Treasuries, man. Okay, how is it? Can China dump $1 trillion and it get purchased right away? That we will have to wait and see. Okay, but China is accelerating their selling of U.S. Treasuries, and so is Russia. Okay. Now, who's going to buy these? We don't know. All right.
Whatever debt China does sell is simply purchased by other countries. For instance, back in August of 2015, China reduced its holdings of U.S. Treasuries by about $180 billion. Despite the scale, this sell-off did not significantly affect the U.S. economy. But the difference between 2015 and 2020, well, there are three major differences. Number one, we're talking about the incredible amount of liquidity the Fed has poured into the market just this year alone. Number two, an attempt by the Fed to go to negative interest rates. And then number three, the issue of a global pandemic that has devastated economies around the world.
Right. So these economies are not going to have the money available or the priority of purchasing U.S. Treasuries. Okay. Especially when they see the U.S. failing, because it's an uncertain future, man. You know? There's a lot of uncertainty. I got a chart that I'm going to pull up in a few minutes after this video about the Fed's economic forecast. It's all over the fucking place.
For the News with Rick Sanchez, I'm Ben Swan.
Ben's good enough to join us live to take us through this. He's going to be joined by George Galloway. So what we're doing with both of these guests is we're offering you the business perspective and the political implications of this story. Ben, I want to begin with you. Look, I just called around some of my sources, and when I asked them why China was doing this, what they told me is that China is tired of seeing the dollar as the world's only currency, and that this is just the beginning of them, China that is, creating or competing and making their own currency at some point in the future. Can you confirm that and explain that to us?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. The one thing I would push back on is the fact that they said this is the beginning. I think you can go back 5 years, 6 years, and say the beginning really began when China, Russia, India, and South Africa began working together as BRICS, and Brazil began working together as the BRICS nations. That was the real first move, I think, to say we're going to get rid of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. China doesn't like it, and other nations don't either, because it puts them in a politically disadvantageous position and economically disadvantageous position. And so what we're seeing right now is the continuation of that effort, and certainly China is not going to hold U.S.
Right. The U.S. uses that dollar, man, to push a lot of nations around. Okay? That's why that chief reserve currency status is so important for the U.S., man. Because once the U.S. dollar loses its chief reserve currency status, this place is going to fucking shit really quick, man. Really quick. All right? There's a lot of economists that have been quoted as saying that the day that the U.S. dollar is no longer the chief reserve currency is the day that the U.S. will die. Okay? This place will be done. And they will absolutely have to introduce something else, which we know is the mark of the beast. Okay? That chip.
Debt forever. They're going to sell it off when they can. As we mentioned in the piece, in the past, they've done.
Because I hate to keep cutting this off, but brothers got to remember, man, you got to put in consideration that it's not just the U.S. dollar. Okay? Paper money and fiat currency in general is dying. All right? The euro's dying. The U.S. dollar's dying.
done this, but never to the extent that they're pushing for it now, and certainly not at a time when the U.S. is doing so much to devalue its own currency.
You know, we are not a business show. We are a news program, The News with Rick Sanchez, which is why we see this particular story as one with vast geopolitical implications. Can you take us through that, George Galloway?
Yes, of course. The dollar was king for a long time. People don't like to be ruled by foreign kings, and they are looking for ways out of it. And there are various ways out of it. Russia and China, for example, have been very big buyers of gold over the last few years, making sure that they have their own reserve. And of course, if the U.S. government and the Treasury are cheapening the value of the dollar for the reasons that Ben ably outlined, then that means that the debt that they are holding is worth less to them than it would be hitherto. So it's a vote of...
Right, there's literally trillions upon trillions of these U.S. Treasuries out there. And when the U.S. does something like this, they're basically telling all the nations that have financially backed them, all right, they're basically saying, listen, we don't care about your investment. Okay, we don't care if you lose money on your investments. That's basically what they're saying. Okay, America has not been using its economic prowess to create allies and form partnerships, man. They've been using it the past few years, all right, to destroy nations, man, to hold them down, okay, whenever they don't go along with the U.S. policies, man.
No confidence in the United States' long-term economic hegemony, and it's a vote of confidence amongst countries like China, preeminently China, that they are able to do it themselves. They don't have to be under the hegemony of the US dollar, which is being used for political purposes. That hegemony is used all over the world for political rather than economic purposes, and the other countries are getting tired of it. China and Russia see America nowadays as a hostile actor. In Europe, they see it as an actor not nearly as friendly as it used to be. And for all these reasons, it will be harder to shift the debt if China starts to sell it.
Ben, let me go back to you with something my sources told me when I was speaking to them this morning. They said while China wants to do this, they're not going to be able to do this for some time because they don't have the infrastructure. And I think what they mean by infrastructure is the bond market that's capable of moving, let's say, $1 trillion, which the United States can do, China cannot do right now. Are they right?
Well, I think they're right, but I think China is doing a pretty good job, and I say good not necessarily because it's good for the United States, but certainly it's good for China. China is moving in a different direction here. What they're essentially trying to do is move into a position where they can put themselves ahead of the United States by developing relationships with other nations, by developing relationships with infrastructure in other nations, loaning money to other nations, becoming a bank to the world in a way that the U.S. has not been in the past. And that's a huge part of this. So as we move forward, one of the things we have to consider is what is the U.S. going to do to respond to this? The U.S. has been frustrated for some time by the concept that essentially China is going around the world and loaning money to other nations for infrastructure builds. They've been moving in this direction. So that's why I'm saying this is a step in a staircase that essentially gets China and the rest of the world off of dependency on the US dollar as a reserve currency. And I got to say this, Rick, it's important for American viewers to understand the significance of this because we have no generations of Americans left, really, essentially none left, who remember a time when the U.S. dollar was not the world's reserve currency. Wow. We have become to the point of assuming it's always been this way. It's only been that way since after World War II, and yet we act as if it is a foregone conclusion that it will always be this way, and it very well may not be.
George Galloway, I see you shaking your head. I wish I could continue this conversation.
Well, it will not be, okay? Okay, it will not be. Because one thing you got to understand is that debt eventually debt catches up, man. You know, you can only live beyond your means for so long. All right? This American greed has ruined their relationship with other nations and in turn has destroyed their currency. Okay? This is Habakkuk 2:4. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire is hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. Right? This is getting into the American hegemonic power, man. All right? He's a proud man, and he doesn't keep at home, man. You know, America is very proud. It's a very proud nation, and they dwell carelessly. They don't care about other nations, man. Okay, even their own allies. They don't care if their allies get the short end of the stick, as long as America prospers in the end, man. You know, when America went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, man, you know, it was rumored that the U.S. made all these deals with these other nations, and that's why they jumped on board, because they thought they were going to get some of these goodies, and a lot of those nations ended up getting not as much as what the U.S. promised, man. Okay, but continuing on. Who enlargeth his desire is hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. Okay, America wasn't happy with being the world's sole superpower, man. Okay, they just keep going and keep going and keep going, man. Well, eventually there's an end to that. Okay, you can only print so much money. You can only create so much debt. You can only live so much beyond your means, man. Okay? But gather unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. Okay, money printing, man. That's what they're doing. All right? Because before, when a nation is on is on something like the gold standard, okay, they keep as much of their currency in circulation based on how much gold reserves they have and other assets that are tied in, man. Okay, fiat currency is just imaginary. Let's look. In fact, you know what? Let's look this definition up. Fiat. A formal authorization or proposition, a decree. Okay, an arbitrary order. But here's the real definition. Let it be done, or so be it. Okay, so be it is also a definition. It wasn't written there, but I've seen that definition before, man. Okay, the U.S. currency it has a certain value put on it because the elites think that it's worth that. Okay, and because psychologically it looks like it's worth that, man. Okay, the scriptures say a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, and an unjust weight is an abomination to the Lord, man. Okay, when you're constantly ticking up interest rates and ticking them down and ticking them up and ticking them down, okay, what you're doing is you're creating an unjust balance, man. Okay, printing money out of thin air is not sound economics. It never lasts. Every fiat currency in the history of the world has failed miserably. Okay? Shall not all these take up a taunting parable against him and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. Okay, because the so-called white man, all right, has gotten all his, which are the biblical Edomites, has gotten all their wealth and power throughout the world through stealing, okay? And through oppression. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And this thick clay is talking about debts. Okay, and ladeth means what? Layer upon layer. All right. And it's a batayat. All right. And it says weight of pledges. Okay. Heavy debts. Okay, when a nation buys those U.S. treasuries, okay, there's a certain yield that gets paid back, man, you know? And when it says that it's what? Backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Okay? Now, the U.S. government doesn't have the same credit that it used to have. People don't have the same faith in the U.S. to pay them back, okay? People don't see the ability in the U.S. to actually be able to pay these debts off. Okay? Debts are burdens, man. Debts are big burdens. Now I want to get into this. Proverbs 22:7. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Right, and and there's so many hands involved in borrowing and letting America borrow all this money. All right, what happens when a nation goes too far into debt? Its debtors start taking over the government. Okay? You look at the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, right? The Federal Reserve. Now, it doesn't have anything to really do with the United States, man. Okay, that is a private centralized bank. It is a private centralized bank. In fact, the reason why it was created was because the United States declared bankruptcy. The United States was bankrupt, man. So the international bankers went in there and said, you know, we can let you borrow money, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they did some kind of deal. And lo and behold, today, here it is, the central bank has such a huge power over, or the Federal Reserve has such a huge amount of power over this economy, man. You know, the Federal Reserve has a huge amount of power over this economy, man. Just like the scripture says, the borrower is servant to the lender. The U.S. government is being lent this money from the Federal Reserve because technically the United States government is broke. All right, it has to get all its money from the Federal Reserve Bank, which prints what? The fiat currency. Okay? That's why when JFK Kennedy, he started a process, okay, to establish, you know, value to the U.S. dollar again by trying to get away from the Federal Reserve, and he ended up getting assassinated for it. All right, they were supposed to be silver-backed dollars, okay. But the borrower is servant to the lender, man. You know, the borrower is servant to the lender. You notice that a lot of these corporations, okay, when it comes to stimulus bills and things like that, they get more and more powerful, but the people just they don't get anything out of the deal, really. It's always the big corporations, man. Because those are the corporations that also own a lot of this U.S. debt, man. You know, and a lot of these major multinational American corporations, all right, are in cahoots with the central bankers, with the international bankers. I want to get this. The Fed's economic forecasts are all over the map. A sign of how uncertain these times are. How uncertain these times are, man. Hold on, let me get this in James 5. James 5:1. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Right, and one thing investors hate is uncertainty. Uncertainty always brings up volatility in the market. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered. Okay, and a large reason of that gold and silver being cankered. Okay, again, these scriptures are like an onion. Okay, there's multiple layers to them. To a lot of these scriptures, man. You know, your gold and silver is cankered. Okay, meaning that what the currency is cankered, man. Let me look up this word cankered in the Greek. What would be the gold and silver? That would be what? Referring to what? The US dollar. Okay? Because it's not based off of gold and silver. Gold and silver is real money. Okay? Kata'ayo, I believe. To rust over. Cover with rust. Yeah, I thought I saw something. To rust down. Okay. Well, hey, when something gets rust, right, it loses value, man. You know, it loses value, right, and it loses strength. When metal gets rusted, it loses strength. Just like the dollar, man, it loses purchasing power. Okay? And the dollar loses value all the time the more that they print of it. So these idiots, they might think, oh, they're printing all this money, it's a good thing. You know, everything will be all right. They're propping everything up. You know, they're not going to let it fail, but see, they fail to see the repercussions of that, man. But all this is leading to the mark of the beast. Okay, because when the US dollar fails, man, it's going to get ugly, man. It's not just going to get ugly here, it's going to get ugly a lot of places. All right? What's going to come out and replace it? Okay, it's not going to be another paper money. People don't want to go that route. People aren't going to go with fiat currency anymore, man. You know, they've seen that it doesn't work enough. Because once the dollar goes, what's going to be next? More than likely, the euro is going to go the way of the dodo. You know, the answer is going to be, when the smoke clears, the mark of the beast. That's what it's going to be, because there's really no other alternative besides an entirely digital system, man. And these people are in so much debt that they don't even know that the more debt that they're in, the more that they're on the hook for it. Okay, the Federal Reserve ain't on the hook for the debt. They're the ones that are issuing the debt, man. Okay, when you look at what money looked like before the Federal Reserve was established, it said that that money was what? Redeemable in an equal amount of gold. Okay? Or gold bullion. Now you can't do that. Now it says that it is a Federal Reserve debt note. That's what it says, man. We're being paid with debt. When we get our paychecks. All right? Gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped together treasure for the last days. All right? Now, wanted to get into this. It says the Fed's economic forecasts are all over the map, a sign of how uncertain these times are. All right? I just want to go over a couple bullet points. For 2021, Fed officials see anything from a continuing recession to the biggest boom since 1984. Markets have been wrestling with the uncertain path of both the economy and the coronavirus. All right, more uncertainty, more confusion. We know how investors feel about uncertainty. The Fed has pledged to keep its benchmark short-term interest rate anchored near zero. Anchored near zero. Okay? So that means what? Pretty much unlimited stimulus, more quantitative easing. It's always this guy that they take fucking pictures of, man. I'm tired of seeing this guy, man. Hey, man, you've been on a bunch of economy updates, man. Come on. That's how you know this shit is all set up, because it's always the same fucking people, man. The Federal Reserve's economic outlook isn't so much pessimistic as it is uncertain, with expectations running a wide gamut from a plodding recovery to a sharp rebound. Okay? If that sounds a lot like the market lately, it's probably not a coincidence. Following its two-day meeting earlier this week, the Fed released its summary of economic projections for GDP, unemployment, inflation, and interest rates. All right? And you brothers have seen this inflation getting pretty wild, man. Especially at the stores, the grocery stores. You know? I went to go get more disinfectant or whatever at the store today. And I'm sitting there like, damn. So, you know, a bottle of this generic disinfectant used to be $2. And now the shit is like $5 something. You know, and then you look over to the Lysol and it's sold out. And they're selling that for like $8-9 a can. All right? Specifically GDP, which measures goods and services produced and is the broadest yardstick for economic growth. The median figures in each of the 3 years for which estimates were provided masked wide disparities of views from the policy-making Federal Open Market Committee's 17 members. For 2020, the median expectation was for a GDP decline of 6.5%. But that was merely the midpoint of forecasts that ranged all the way from 10 to negative 4.2%. You know what? We really don't need to read any of that nonsense, man. Because the chart is right here. Okay? You see that they expect GDP to go up 7% in 2021, 6% in 2022. All right, and then you look at the negative outcome. That's a big gap, man. That's a big gap. Okay, they're going to have to fudge a lot of numbers if they want to get to this high point, man. All right, because Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai's eyes are on this sinful kingdom. And he's destroying it right now, piece by piece. The jobless rate. Right, unemployment rate. As you can see there. Okay. Now this is funny. This is funny right here. Inflation. This is the whole point. Okay. They're saying that inflation is just going to go up 1.2% for 2020 with a low end range of 0.5%. I'm sorry, but it's gone up way past that already. It's gone up way past that already, man. They're lying, all right? Because what they add in CPI is a bunch of nonsense. They take whenever something gets too high in price, they just take it out of the CPI estimates, man. You know, like things like energy and stuff, man. You know? They'll add energy into the CPI when energy's cheap, but when energy's expensive, they won't. It's the same thing with housing, man. You know, they like to fiddle with the numbers because they're the devil, man. They're the deceiver. Okay, they're trying to tell you that, yeah, it might be a little rough, but everything's gonna get back on track. But what they're not telling you is that this 2% inflation is absolute for 2021 is going to be absolute bullshit. All right? Nations cannot just print trillions and trillions of their own currency and expect, out of thin air at least, and expect inflation rates that are this low. This is absolutely crazy, man. Okay? And then you wonder why China wants to sell all these treasuries. Yeah. Slacking, brothers. I'm a little weary right now, but yeah, that just goes to show you, man, that everything is all over the map with America. Okay? What was once considered a very stable superpower is no longer stable. People don't have confidence in this place no more. And with that is going to go the US dollar. All right? And when it does, man, it's going to get really ugly really fast. Okay? Because that public debt isn't owed to the government. A lot of it is owed to the Federal Reserve. Like I said, they're the ones that issue the debt. And they're going to be the ones that institute the chip, man, the international bankers. Okay, that's part of their plans to implement all these private central banks throughout the world. The private central banks push for policies that bankrupt the existing governments. Okay, and then the central banks get more and more control over those governments, man. Because like the scripture says, the borrower is servant to the lender. That's why when Trump went and said he was going to force Powell to resign, he laughed at him. And he said, you can't do that. You don't have the power to do that, man. Okay? The chairman of the Federal Reserve is not appointed by the president. Okay? He's selected by the president, but they still have to get voted on by the board. You know, how's that for a so-called free country? You Americans will believe that you're so free, you know. But wait till these international bankers go and start pushing this chip, man. Start pushing this mark of the beast. All right, because this is how it starts, man. This is how it starts. You know, these bankers have America by the balls right now. And we've seen it in a lot of smaller nations, man. With these bankers, they take over, they open up their privatized banks, the Rothschilds and so on and so forth, and the other elite families. And then they get these nations in so much debt, and chunk by chunk, they start installing their own congressmen and senators and whatever. You know, and they start slowly taking control over the policies of that nation, just like Mayor Amschel Bauer, or Mayor Amschel Rothschild, I believe, said, give me control over a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws. Because at the end of the day, if you're in control of the money, you're in control of the laws, man. All right? And we're seeing that, man. We're seeing that because once this coronavirus came out, these devils let us know that we ain't got no damn rights no more, man. You know, we're under a national emergency here in Babylon, okay? Technically, the Constitution's been suspended. You know, the government's doing all kinds of contact tracing. You know, you got companies coming out saying no vaccine, no job. That wouldn't be happening if America wasn't in so much debt. Okay, debt is a tool of enslaving people. But this is also from CNBC. Total U.S. debt, because I'm not going to pull up the market charts. All right, because those markets are all full of shit anyways. Total U.S. debt surges to $55.9 trillion amid big increases in corporate and government borrowing. Okay? Now, this is households, government, and corporations. Okay? Debt surged and household net worth tumbled in the first 3 months of the year as the initial impact of the coronavirus pandemic hit, according to the Fed. Total domestic non-financial debt jumped by 11.7% to $55.9 trillion, the report said. Okay? So pretty much, man, you know, this debt is a form of choking a nation or a people, man. You know, any brothers that have been in debt, you know. All right? You know what a pain in the ass it is, man. All right? And it's the same thing with this nation, man. It's so far in debt that it's basically choking itself. All right? Things don't move as smoothly when there's a lot of debt, man. Okay, I'm going to get this scripture and then I'm going to wrap it up. 2nd Ezra 16 and 21. I had a few more scriptures, but this has gone on, you know, enough. 2nd Ezra 16 and 21. Behold, victuals shall be so good, cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case, which is what the people think. Okay, they don't see, they're more concerned with George Floyd than they are the economic crisis that's about to hit them. Okay, they think that these people, these American people, they think that just because they could go to the store and get a TV for a decent price, or they could still afford clothes and things like that, that everything is going to be A-okay. Okay? Oh, they got they're getting them stimulus checks and the unemployment. All right? Coming in every week. All right? So they think that everything is in good case. Oh, the government's got my back. But they don't know that all that money printing is just going to create inflation, and that money that they're getting is going to be worthless, man. You know, it's going to lose value, man. And even then shall evils grow upon earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. And that's what's going on right now. There's a great confusion in the earth. Okay? Nobody except the prophets know what the hell is going on or what the future entails. All right? Now let me get this in 2nd Ezra 6. Second Ezra 6 and 9. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Okay, and we're near the end of Esau's world. You know, we're at the end of Esau's world, man. You know, we know what's on the horizon, man. We don't know exactly how everything's gonna play out, but we know that the Heavenly Father Yahweh is bringing this place down, man. You know, just the sheer uncertainty. I know I use that a lot in this lesson. Just the sheer uncertainty shows that America is done, man. There's no confidence in this place no more. You know, this is the end of Esau. All right? Everybody's hating on this devil now. Nobody likes this devil no more. Nobody wants to work with this devil. Nobody wants to cooperate with this devil no more. All right? But with that, till next time, shalom. Peace and blessings to the elect.